Okay, in this tutorial I'm going to talk all about teeth. So teeth are actually a part of the digestive system. We rely on our teeth to actually break up our food, and your teeth are very, very important because without them you wouldn't be able to process your food. In an evolutionary sense, individuals who lost their teeth basically weren't able to survive. They weren't able to eat. So in animals especially, their teeth are an incredibly important part of their digestive system. So let's look at the parts of the tooth. The upper part, the part that sticks up out from the gum, is what we call the crown. So it's essentially just the bit that we can actually see as the crown. The root is the part that sticks down into our jaw. Now there's a layer of sort of fleshy material, the gum or the gingiva, which surrounds the tooth, and you can basically see your gums are the pink fleshy stuff around your teeth. But underneath that is the bone, so this is part of the jawbone, and the tooth actually sits into that. Now on the outside, the very outer layer of the tooth, is the enamel. Enamel is the hardest substance in our body, and it's a highly calcified type of bone. Basically, it's got a very high quantity of calcium in it, very hard material, enamel. Dentin is kind of a slightly softer layer, slightly further down, and it's got tiny little tubes that actually run through it that can sense, help to kind of sense, or they're filled with fluid, help the pulp in here to sense what's going on the outside. So when you bite into something really cold, the fluid in those tubes kind of gets cold, and that's passed on to the pulp on the inside there. So the dentin can still develop. We can still grow dentin and add to it, but the enamel is something that doesn't kind of grow back. The enamel is once the tooth is developed, the enamel's there, and that's it. If it's damaged, it's gone. So the dentin is something that can be replaced or can actually grow. It's I guess still got living cells in it. Whereas then the pulp and the nerve, this is where we get the bulk of the cells that are actually living, that are producing the dentin, or as the tooth develops, the dentin, and then which develops, I believe, into the enamel. So enamel, the outermost layer; dentin, the layer just underneath, and then the pulp, or the nerve, which the pulp is basically a soft tissue inside the innermost part of the tooth, and this contains essentially the pulp contains nerves and blood vessels, which essentially feed the cells in the tooth. So this part is rich in living cells that produce and maintain the dentin, and they have nerves that actually can sense what's going on here. So the bone down here, and those nerves and blood vessels run down into the jaw, where they join together and join the bloodstream. And those nerves will eventually run up to the brain. So we can actually sense pain if we break a tooth, or if there's a cavity gets all the way through, or those sorts of things. The nerves can actually sense that. Cool. There is one other layer that's kind of not on this diagram here, which I should add or quickly mention, and that's this one. The lower part, the outer layer, so at the top in the crown, it's called enamel, but the outer layer of the tooth here is called cementum. Cementum. And that's kind of the glue. This outer layer is what sticks the tooth to the gum or in the tooth socket, and kind of glues it in place. So up here, the enamel, a really tough layer for chewing and grinding and all those sorts of things, and down here the cementum, the layer that holds it onto into the tooth socket, the cementum. And you can see the name, you can see where it gets it from. Cementum, like cement, is kind of that glue that holds the tooth in. So those are the parts of the tooth, and you are expected to actually know the parts of the tooth. So we could give you a diagram asking you to actually label those parts of the tooth. Alright, let's carry on. Let's grab my mouse. Alright, let's carry on. So the next part, we're going to look at the different types of teeth. So how to be a tooth sleuth. Sleuth kind of means like detective or spy or something like that. So guys, we're going to look at how to be a tooth sleuth. You can actually identify a lot about an animal by looking at the different types of teeth. So the objective is that at the end of this you'll be able to determine which mammals, so animals, are carnivores, herbivores, and omnivores. So if we look at the teeth in these animals, there are 4 types of teeth they can have. Incisors at the front, canines are the pointed ones that are just at the sides at the front here, all right, and then premolars and molars. So if we look at what those parts do, the incisors at the front are chisel shaped, so flat, and they're used for nipping, gnawing, or scraping, and I think they're kind of missing a word there. They're really used for cutting, like scissors. So incisors are used to sort of snip off like bits of food. Now the canines, which were the pointed ones, so those are what you would often call your vampire teeth, are the long, conical, means cone-shaped, kind of pointed teeth that are used for catching and puncturing and holding and killing prey. So you can guess which ones those belong to. And then the premolars and molars, which are basically the teeth behind your cheek, so your cheek teeth, are used for shearing and crushing and grinding. So if we look at what these words mean, carnivore, herbivore, omnivore, you've probably heard of them before, but a carnivore is an animal that has large canines. It has premolars and molars, but they're still kind of sharp, and they're still for cutting and shearing. They're not so much for crushing. Herbivores eat plants, and they have large premolars and molars with flat surfaces for grinding. And an omnivore eats both plants and animals, so it has features of both. So if we come back over here, so incisors are kind of found in both, so they're used for snipping things off. In a carnivore, they might still have incisors to help sort of cut bits of meat off, but a herbivore still needs to cut off leaves and things like that. Canines, these are really found in, large canines are found in the carnivores, and they're used often for puncturing like blood vessels. You'll often see a carnivore grab another animal by the neck and try to sort of puncture maybe blood vessels in the neck. So these are for puncturing, killing, holding their prey. Then we've got our premolars and our molars, and the difference is that basically in a herbivore they'll have potentially more and larger, flatter molars that are used for essentially as a grinding surface to grind away at foods, whereas carnivores have smaller and more pointed, sort of sharper molars, often called carnassial teeth. So they're molars where the little cusps, the little bits that stick up on our teeth, the little bumps, have really sort of started to get larger and more pointed so that they can actually cut into the meat. So herbivores have large, flat molars, whereas carnivores have smaller, more pointed or sharper molars. At molars and premolars, we're just going to treat that as one group. Okay, so there we go. Those are the types of teeth there. Let's have a look at a few examples. All right, in a human mouth, you can see these teeth. Incisors are the ones at the front. The canines are the pointy ones, so those are the ones you might call your vampire teeth, your slightly more pointed ones. And then we've got premolars and molars. Now we actually have very small teeth for an animal, and that's largely because we cook our food, and so we don't need such large teeth to process it anymore. We process our food by cooking it and chopping it and grinding it. We kind of do things to our food to process it before we put it in our mouths. Alright, so let's have a look. A bobcat. Let's look at the skull here. Well, it's got large canines, so straight away I'm thinking carnivore, but maybe it could still be omnivore. Let's have a look. So canine teeth are large. Premolars have shearing surfaces. So shearing is like scissor-like sharp surfaces. One very small molar is found on each side. So they've only got one small molar, so that tells me they're not doing a lot of that grinding, which tells me that this is definitely a carnivore. Bobcat is a carnivore. So why do you need such large molars to grind up plant material? Well, basically, plant material is very fibrous. Now, we tend to cook a lot of the plant materials we eat, like potatoes and all those kind of things. If they're not cooked, often some of the more fibrous things, especially like grassy foods, things that we don't even bother cooking them and eating them, they need to really be ground up into kind of a paste. And if you look at cows, they sit there chewing kind of all day, and what they're doing is grinding up that grass. And they'll actually swallow it let it digest a bit, and they'll throw it up again into their mouths and then grind more to just really grind up those fibers. Anyway, raccoon. A raccoon has canine teeth. Their canine teeth are large, and they have premolars and molars have both shearing and grinding surfaces. So we've got a couple of large canines here, but we've got molars, premolars and molars that still both have sort of a grinding surface. So I'm guessing here an omnivore. The molars are still, look at this back tooth, is still quite large. Here, tiny, so they're quite pointed, whereas here, sort of a little bit larger. Raccoon's probably an omnivore. Alright, beaver. So a beaver has incisors that are very large and chisel-like for gnawing, and the canine teeth are absent, and the premolars and molars are flat with many folds. So no canines and really large flat molars, herbivore, definitely. Coyote, canine teeth are large, very large canines. Well, that's already a clue, it's probably a carnivore. Upper premolars have sharp shearing surfaces, so that tells us, yep, that still fits with canine. And then upper molars have flattened surfaces. Well, that could almost be a little bit, indication of a herbivore. But a herbivore really has to have sort of lots of large, flat premolars and molars. So this is probably still a carnivore. Could argue it might be an omnivore, that it still might have some plant stuff in it. But I'm guessing just with the size of those canines, and if you look at the teeth at the top here, they're still very pointed. So the molars here really aren't that flat and that large. Down here, molars are a decent size, but they definitely still don't look that flat to me. So this definitely looks like a carnivore to me. Virginia opossum. So a type of possum here. Let's have a look. 10 very small incisors at the front here, 10 very small incisors. Canine teeth are large, sign that it's a carnivore. But then premolars and molars have both shearing and grinding surfaces. Well, at the moment you see those grinding surfaces, it must be eating some plant material as well. So the possum is an omnivore. White-tailed deer, upper incisors and canine teeth are absent, so it doesn't have incisors or canines. So it's only got premolars and molars, and they've got tall cusps for grinding. So these grinding teeth, well, that has to be a herbivore. Okay, couple more examples, things that you might sort of get in a test. 2 skulls here. Which one's the herbivore? Which one's the carnivore? And maybe give a justification or give 2 reasons for your choice. So the top one, why would this be a herbivore? Well, look, no canines and large molars with flat surfaces for grinding. The bottom one, canine, has very sharp, very large canines, and pointed, smaller and pointed premolars and molars here in the mouth. There are a few other features. Here the eye sockets of a herbivore face more to the side. That helps a herbivore to see the predators coming. Whereas a carnivore, which is maybe feeding on this herbivore, has eye sockets that face more forwards. They look more forwards, so it can focus more on what's in front of it, its prey. So this will have a wider field of vision, whereas the carnivore will have a more focused or forward overlapping field of vision. If we look at here, another skull, what do we think here? Let's have a look. So the reasonably large canines. We've got some incisors definitely there. Some of these premolars are definitely still quite pointed. So I'd probably be thinking, we've still got some molars at the back here that are quite flat, so possibly an omnivore. We've got large canines, some pointed premolars, but decent, large flat premolars. Large flat molars there. What have we got here? Here they're all pretty pointed, so that the molars at the back aren't very big, and they're all relatively pointed, sharp, kind of large canines. I'd say that's definitely a carnivore. And this one here, look, incisors, no carnivores at all, and large flat molars for grinding, that would be our herbivore. So we've got 3 skulls there that you can look at. Here, omnivore, large pointed teeth, but large flat molars at the back. So they've got those 2 features there. This one here, sort of large canines and relatively pointed sharp teeth all the way through. whereas this herbivore doesn't even have any canines and large flat molars for grinding. So there you go, that's how to be a tooth sleuth, so I hope that helped. And I guess the key things there, guys, is you got to learn the parts of the tooth, the types of teeth, so incisors, canines, premolars, molars. Premolars and molars you can just treat as often as one group. We probably won't ask you to identify the difference there. And then lastly, to be able to look at a skull and identify a few features that tell you whether it's a herbivore, a carnivore, or an omnivore. So guys, I hope you found that helpful, and I think we'll leave it there.